Have you ever gotten just so exhausted while playing a game, when wave after wave of enemies just keeps coming, and it just kinda turns into a slugfest? Or when you give up halfway through a movie, even though there's plenty of action, the plot simply refuses to move forwards? It could just be that the video game and movie were suffering from poor pacing. Pace in narrative, like screenwriting for movies, is the speed at which the story is told. Narrative pacing deals with setting suspense and tension, affects the mood of the story, and controls the narrative flow. Similarly, but a bit different, in level design, pacing is the act of distributing player activities and events in a specific order and rhythm to create a desired level of intensity and variation. With the interactive nature of games, it's all about what the player does and experiences, and the narrative pace can be completely separate from this. When designing a mission or quest, we usually divide the separate moments up into what we call beats. Those beats are specific activities or events that are often tied to a specific location in your level. Let's look at A Plague Tale Requiem as a case study. The overarching structure of the game is already neatly split into 17 chapters. Let's pick out chapter 4 and see how this can be split into individual beats. The chapter starts with a cinematic, setting the context for the actions that are about to unfold. The next beat is largely traversal and exposition, expanding on the context by showing the player the state of the city as they move through it. In beat 3, the objective of reaching the ship is reinforced, and though there's some traversal, the gameplay focus is on a light stealth gameplay segment. Beat 4 sets up the expectation of a combat or stealth encounter, and then subverts the player's expectation with the arrival of hordes of rats, turning the next beat into a puzzle segment, having the player figure out how to get across. Reaching a tar workshop on the other side, there's another puzzle segment where the player is introduced to a new tool that can be used to deal with the rats. Beat 6, surprisingly, is another puzzle segment. Generally, we want to create variation in types of gameplay between beats to prevent things from getting too repetitive. But purposely breaking this formula prevents the player being able to predict the structure completely, and in this case, also provides the player with a good opportunity to practice with the abilities newly added to their arsenal without immediate combat pressure. Following this, there's a short cinematic beat, introducing a new character and setting the stage for the next gameplay beat, giving the player full access to their arsenal. This long gameplay beat presents itself as a hybrid encounter space, meaning both stealth and combat are viable options as long as the player makes it to the other side alive. Beat 9 is another short cinematic beat, setting the scene for the next gameplay beat, in which the city gets flooded by rats and an escape gameplay segment forces the player to run to stay alive to reach Hugo and their mother. That's more or less the end of the gameplay for this chapter, with a cinematic that's followed by a traversal beat that's really just purely narrative and doesn't provide a gameplay challenge, and wrapped up by a final cinematic, serving as a conclusion and setting the stage for the next chapter to begin. We've looked at how Chapter 4 of A Plague Tale Requiem distributes different types of gameplay to create a varied experience, and how we can use beats to get an overview, allowing us to assess and tweak the game's structure even before we dive in and start building our levels. But on top of managing gameplay variety, another core use of gameplay beats is to set up a satisfying rise and fall of the game's intensity. Let's look at the 13 beats again and plot what we call an intensity graph. We start off with a cinematic beat, which has a low intensity because despite how heated the argument in the scene might get, the player knows there's no direct threat to them and therefore no gameplay pressure. Next, we have a traversal beat. This is still very low in intensity as there's no real challenge posed to the player and any enemies in the scene are physically separated from the player. In beat 3, the intensity spikes, as in this stealth segment, the enemies pose a real threat and the player is required to time their actions well to prevent getting caught. In the next puzzle beat, the thematic pressure in the form of hordes of rats might be quite high, but the gameplay pressure is fairly low, as there's no time pressure and it's really about finding the right solution to reaching the other side. The next beat, also a puzzle beat, maintains a similar amount of intensity, which gives the player enough breathing room to learn a new game mechanic. The third puzzle beat in a row also poses the real threat of the rats, but this too can be dealt with in a player's own time. It's the context of having to work together with a soldier, often a mortal enemy, that builds a bit of extra tension throughout and culminates in a final confrontation. After this, a short cinematic beat allows the player to take a short break and sit back, which provides a needed dip in the intensity. The long gameplay beat after this really ramps up in intensity, which is made more impactful by the short lower intensity cinematic beat by use of contrast. You may have started noticing the overall pacing increase throughout the chapter. The following cinematic allows the intensity to drop a bit again, before turning up the intensity to 11 in the final real gameplay beat of the chapter. Overall climbing intensity is always more interesting than a stagnant pace, but as there's only so much you can do to ramp up intensity, the downbeats are absolutely essential to allow the player to release the tension from the previous beat and for us to start building it back up again. The cinematic of beat 11 is still high in intensity, but is again without direct player involvement or stakes, allowing the intensity to drop enough to not make the next way lower intensity beats feel too disjointed. The virtually non-gameplay traversal beat 12 drops the intensity even further, not only fitting the desolation of the scene and the uncertainty of the character's future, it also, alongside final cinematic beat 13, allows the intensity to reset virtually back to zero, which provides a clean slate for chapter 5 to start building it all from the ground up again. Looking at the steady rise of intensity interspersed with small drops to make the intensity rises feel more significant, and a well-distributed variety of beat types starts giving us a pretty clear picture of what is required to balance our beats and intensity curve in a way that's engaging and feels meaningful. Overall, pacing is a crucial aspect of level design, as it can greatly impact player engagement and enjoyment of the game. A well-paced game can keep players engaged and motivated, while a poorly paced game can result in frustration and boredom. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.